From game day to recruiting, you're covered with Huskers Illustrated Radio. Huskers Illustrated Radio is sponsored by Fontanelle Hybrids, serving Western Corn Belt growers for 80 years on 1400 KLIN.
RedZoneTickets.com is the official ticket supplier of Huskers Illustrated. Choose RedZoneTickets.com for all 2016 Nebraska Cornhusker home and away games, just 2 weeks away from the season opener against Fresno State. That'll be a 6 o'clock kickoff, 1 o'clock pregame, and you can hear all the action right here on Lincoln's Husker Radio 1400 KLIN. Hi, I'm Tommy Rezach, in for Cole Stukenholtz today, and obviously talking about the crazy week that has been Husker football, the soap opera, if you will, Nebraska and wide receivers coach Keith Williams, the news that came out today after he was arrested and charged with his third DUI last weekend. It was degraded to a misdemeanor due to the margin of error on the breathalyzer test. That's pretty standard protocol when somebody blows a .15 in a DUI. And somebody pleads not guilty in the preliminary hearing. It's we've heard from several lawyers here in the KLIN newsroom this week that's pretty standard protocol, that they bump it down to .08 and then they kind of work it out in the trial, and that's what Keith Williams has coming up on October the 24th. So just yesterday, this Nebraska, Shawn Eichorst, Mike Riley announced that they are suspending Williams without pay until August 31st and said he will not coach in the Cornhuskers' first 4 games. Now, we're going to play a little bit of Mike Riley audio, get an Eichorst quote in there as well. Then I'm going to get to this ESPN article by Brian Bennett that I found yesterday, and I found it really interesting. I hope you will as well. So here's the first quote from Mike Riley on Keith Williams from yesterday's press conference at the Hawks Championship Center.
This has been a very concerning event in every way. We realize consequences of somebody being in a situation like this. Can't say that I know what it feels like for people that are examining this situation, because I don't want to dismiss that at all. It is a really serious event.
All right, one more from Coach Riley.
I made a recommendation to these folks in a meeting. We talked about it for a long, long time about what's best to do. It's a hard situation. And we decided to do what you already know that we did.
So again, you said Mike Riley, he made a suggestion to suspend Williams for a number of games, and that's kind of how this idea came about, and they kind of negotiated throughout the week. They didn't want to rush this decision. They wanted it to come out sooner rather than later so everybody could stop speculating and spreading rumors about the whole thing. So I thought the timing actually worked out pretty well. They got it out there before the end of the week and kind of put rumors and speculation to bed, if you will. And with that, we're going to play one more drop from Coach Riley, then we get to the article.
I have a lot of faith in Keith. Keith is the same guy I hired a year ago. He might be a better guy, and he made a terrible mistake. And we have decided to support him, give him an opportunity to work with our kids.
And that was kind of the theme yesterday. We have decided to support him. I think between Riley and Eichorst, I heard that phrase about 4 or 5 times. They said this is a very serious mistake. Eichorst said at one point, Williams' margin for error is, quote, very, very small. So I think everybody understands the seriousness of what Williams has done, but they think after further review that it is in the university's best interests to help Keith Williams on the road to recovery, and they think that, and I think there's a quote from Mike Riley, we may or may not get to it, but Riley said, this goes beyond recruiting. It's this guy, he changes kids' lives. He talks real life stuff to his players. He people listen when he talks. He's like, he has a very positive influence on our players. But that's the thing. That was the thing that I kind of grappled with yesterday when I was at that press conference. They like Keith Williams. They like the value he brings. He's obviously Nebraska's best recruiter. And let me just say, you'd be naive to think that his recruiting abilities had nothing to do with this decision. I mean, obviously they did. I mean, he was arrested with this DUI last week, and it just so happens that last Saturday he had a 5-star recruit in town. So, I mean, if you don't think, it's obvious that Keith Williams is a great recruiter, and if you don't think that has nothing to do with it, then you're a little bit naive. Obviously, that factored in some regard. But getting to this article by Brian Bennett, so he starts it off, his first paragraph, stating what the punishment is, the lead. Keith Williams arrested and charged with DUI last week, suspended without pay till August 31st, will not coach the first 4 games. But then he goes on to say the discipline is not strong enough, not even close. Williams has begun counseling and will participate in outreach efforts about the dangers of drunken driving, and that's what Nebraska coach Mike Riley said in his written statement yesterday. Here's more from Brian Bennett, though. Let's all hope Williams gets the help that he needs. By all accounts, he's a popular coach among the players, but he also clearly has a problem, and Nebraska fans should have a problem with the penalty he received. Here's more from Shawn Eichorst. He said in a statement Friday morning that the situation cannot be overstated and that Keith's conduct was reckless and potentially fatal, end quote. Yet, and this is from Brian Bennett, yet the school's decision to levy a 2-week suspension without pay and ban Williams from the sideline for 4 games hardly seems to live up to Eichorst's words. Here's a quote from Shawn Eichorst yesterday about the suspension.
Clearly we have high expectations and high standards, and there's no doubt that Keith understands the gravity of the major failing in judgment that he had this past weekend. I think he also understands, as we all understand, he has very, very small margin of error moving forward.
And then Riley said Williams admitted his error in judgment, but here's another quote from Brian Bennett. Driving while intoxicated on at least 3 occasions in Keith Williams' case, arrested in 2004, 2009, and just last week. Driving while intoxicated on at least 3 occasions is more than just an error in judgment. It's a crime. Anytime you do it, you're putting your life and the lives of others at risk. Here's more from Brian Bennett. Ask yourself this. If you got your 3rd DUI, how do you think your employer would react? And that is kind of what I grapple with the most here, folks. If Mike Riley or Shawn Eichorst had 3 DUIs, would they still have a job? If Governor Pete Ricketts had 3 DUIs, would he still have a job? Now, I'm not saying termination is the best option. I'm not saying that. But I kind of think, I will say, I do not think this punishment is enough. And I think it's great that the university is doing what they're doing to help him. I mean, that's kind of a given. Whether or not he was going to keep his job, I never had any doubt that Coach Riley, the athletic department, Eichorst, everybody involved, would take the proper steps to get him help. I never had doubt, and I think it's great what they're doing. I think they have a great system in place. They have really good people in place to help him because, as Brian Bennett says, and as a lot of people have said, he clearly has some kind of problem. And Eichorst did say this decision is a risk. Keeping him on is a risk. Now, we don't know the legal ramifications of this whole thing yet. The court date is still over a month away, 2 months away, in October 24th. So we won't know, I guess, the final verdict on that. And, I mean, obviously that court decision is not going to be settled in one day, in one case. So we won't know the official legal ramifications of all this. I'm guessing there's going to be some kind of significant license revocation. I think there will be some kind of significant probation. But with 3 DUIs in the state of Nebraska, I'm no expert, I'm not a lawyer, but I've heard from several people who are a little bit more knowledgeable in this subject that a lot of times 3 DUIs could mean jail time. 3 strikes, you're out is kind of the way it goes with DUIs. Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's certainly a possibility, at least house arrest. Like I said, Dirk Chatlin asked about that yesterday. But they do have protocol in place in case that happens. Here's more from Shawn Eichorst.
I think the totality of the circumstances had an impact on what we looked at. Major failure in judgment. I think all those qualities that Mike talked about that Keith brings to the table, but you got to look at the other part of it too. So I can tell you, we looked at it very, very thoroughly.
So that was, I believe that was Steve Sipple of the Journal-Star who asked him, you know, how did these 2 prior arrests weigh into the decision? They said they looked at the prior arrests. They looked at the good qualities. Shawn said, Mike talked about the good qualities that he brings. You know, he changes kids' lives. He has a positive influence. But if he has a positive influence, is it right? Is this punishment right? 4 games, and he's only suspended without pay for 11 days. That means starting on September 1st, he's going to be getting paid to not coach those first 4 games. I don't know. It's a tough situation. I do feel for Coach Riley. This is not an easy decision. There's a lot of strong opinions on this, all the way around, however you slice it. But I thought the ideal punishment, me personally, would have just to have suspended him for the season. And I really don't think anybody would have had a major issue with that. Or at least everybody would have at least understood it. And I could see how my knee-jerk reaction when I heard it was his third DUI, my knee-jerk reaction was like, fire him. I mean, this is outrageous. But then on Monday, obviously the big news is it got demoted to a misdemeanor. So then that obviously changed things. And so then you could kind of maybe start to say, all right, well, maybe termination is a little harsh. Maybe kicking him to the curb is a little much. But it's still not, I wouldn't say unreasonable. I mean, if I were a parent of a recruit that Keith Williams was talking to, if I was the parent of a recruit that Keith Williams was offering or recruiting, I'd be a little concerned, as I'm sure that they are. A little bit more from Brian Bennett, then we're going to take a break. Michael Bruntz of Huskers Illustrated and 24/7 Sports will join us on the Liberty First Credit Union Hotline. Here's just another paragraph from the ESPN article by Brian Bennett yesterday. Williams works on a college campus as in charge of teaching and molding young men. Alcohol abuse and drunken driving are problems on campuses around the country. Educators and coaches have to be held to a higher standard because they are setting the examples. What message is Nebraska sending to its young people by, quote, slapping Williams on the wrist here? I don't like anyone for calling for anyone to be fired, and Williams needs help. Nebraska could have suspended him for the season, like I said, or moved him to an administrative, non-coaching role while he undergoes counseling. I like that idea. Eichorst said he hopes Williams will take the opportunity to teach our student-athletes, staff, and greater community about making the right decisions. But by saying what? That they might lose 2 weeks' pay and miss 4 games if they don't? Is that the message here? You get 3 DUIs and your best coach, your best recruiter, best motivator doesn't get paid for 11 days and only has to miss a third of the season? Is that the message we want to send to our young people of the state? I don't know. I feel for Coach Williams, his son Keon, his wife, his family. This is a very difficult situation. I am thankful that nobody was hurt. Obviously, this could have been a lot worse. But, I mean, when it's 3 DUIs, folks, this is a little bit bigger than football. This is bigger than recruiting. This is bigger than him being a good guy to the kids that he coaches. I don't know. I knew there would be punishments. I mean, Mike Riley said that right off the bat. But I don't know if it's enough. And I think there's a lot of people who feel the same way. I'm not saying fire him. I think it's, like I said, I think it's great the university wants to help him and give him a shot at redemption. I'm a big believer in second chances. But it's 3 DUIs. I don't know. That court case, it'll be interesting. Like a lot of people have said, jail time is a very, very, very real possibility after your 3rd DUI in the state of Nebraska. Obviously, his first 2 DUIs were in California in 04 and 09. So, obviously, that kind of makes a difference. I mean, there's some gray area there, but still, 3 DUIs, very serious situation. As Mike Riley said, he said, people kill themselves, kill others. It's a very serious thing when you get behind the wheel of a car while you're drunk. Just don't do it. Keith Williams is making $400,000 a year. He can certainly afford to call an Uber, a taxi, whatever. The ironic part is he hit an Uber driver at 9th and N Street last Sunday morning. It's just, it's a very sad situation. But before we go to break and bring on Michael, I do want to give credit to Mike Riley and Shawn Eichorst. I have been a little bit critical of them in this segment. But I do want to give them credit that there's been a lot of distractions. I mean, it goes all the way back to July with the tragic loss of Sam Foltz. It goes to the injury of Gerald Foster. This, that, and the other thing, the A.J. Bush transfer. I will say the assistant coaches, the players, they have handled these distractions very, very well. I went to about 3 different press conferences, practices this week. They did not seem fazed. Mike Riley still seems very chipper, very optimistic about this team. I truly believe that everybody's focus is where it needs to be, and I think that's the most important thing. But obviously, this is a tough thing to kind of zone out. It's tough to dial in, but I truly believe this team is dialed in. So they should be, with the first game of the year only a fortnight away. So we'll continue to follow it. Again, Keith Williams has a court date on October 24th, so we really won't know a whole lot. There really won't be a whole lot more that comes out on this between now and then. But that's the punishment. Again, if you have any thoughts, you can tweet at the show at ColeHI Radio. You can also tweet at me. Follow me on Twitter at TJMREZAC, at TJMREZAC. We're going to take a break. When we return, Michael Bruntz from Huskers Illustrated and 24/7 Sports will join us. We'll get kind of a Husker analyst's opinion on this. We'll ask him about Keith Williams, but we're going to try and focus shift the focus to on-the-field stuff. A.J. Bush, Gerald Foster, maybe the defensive line, running back battles, things like that. Try to actually focus on football as we're 14 days away from the season opener. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to Huskers Illustrated Radio, sponsored by Fontenelle Hybrids, serving Western Corn Belt growers for 80 years on 1400 KLIN.